Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick with this week's Know Your Foe episode for the Cincinnati Bengals entering Week 17. Got a great guest today who joined us for the first game. He's going to join us for what is a very different Bengals outlook right now. Matt Minich, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I can't complain at all. Really loved your first episode, and I want to make sure we get you on again at least once per year going forward, but appreciate you doing this one on short notice. Obviously, a lot has changed for the Bengals since the last meeting. The biggest thing being Joe Burrow's absence. Couple different quarterbacks. Each has had some success in their own way. Maybe tell us about some of the big changes as the season has evolved.
Yeah, so the biggest change is obviously Joe Burrow. And, you know, from the Bengals' point of view, you know, the first Ravens game was the first time that Joe Burrow looked like a rookie in my eyes. You know, the first game he's, a little bit kind of feeling himself out, the first game against the Chargers. But in that Ravens game and then in the first matchup with the Steelers, you know, those are situations where the defense was throwing more at him than he was comfortable with. And you could definitely see it, and that he was, you know, feeling the pressure and feeling the adjustment to the NFL in those games. So I was really looking forward to seeing those matchups in the second half of the season and how Burrow was able to adjust. And obviously that, you know, a big part of that is coaching and preparing him for those situations. But I really wanted to see what he could do the second time around against both these teams. So obviously, very disappointing that we don't get to see that this time around. With, you know, in terms of the Steelers' second matchup, you know, we got to look at that without Burrow and, you know, down to Ryan Finley in that game. And, you know, we did see them step up and have you know, a very good game plan and figure some things out. And that was not a stellar offensive performance. But the defense played very well, and the offense was able to kind of grind it out and figure out some things with Ryan Finley running the ball in order to get the win in that game. So definitely saw some steps forward from a coaching perspective and you know, from a team figuring out how to do things perspective. But really wanted to see Burrow matched up against at least one of these top defenses again this year, and unfortunately we didn't get that. So Burrow's the huge loss, but without Burrow, you know, the defense has stepped up and for the most part played pretty well. Last week was an exception. Deshaun Watson definitely gave them some fits, but fortunately the offense was really clicking last week, and they came away with that win. But overall, I mean, yeah, really, the defense is picked it up, and they've kind of started to play better complementary football and really feed off of each other over these last couple of weeks. That against the Steelers, the offense wasn't playing very well, but the defense played lights out, and they gave them some opportunities. They created some turnovers, and you know that helped the team come forward and win the game, even with the limitations at the quarterback position. And, you know, not being able to be extremely successful offensively. And, you know, turned it around a week later. They traveled to Houston on a short week. And, you know, against the Texans, the defense struggled, especially in the second half. But the offense was able to score points and keep scoring points. The Bengals offense, they had not scored a touchdown in the third quarter since the Jacksonville game. I believe that was October 4th.
That's a long time.
Yeah, that's a long time. And
I'll tell you what, Matt, we're going to come back and talk about the offense. I have to leave space for a reader here. We'll be back in just a minute. All right. Now, you're mentioning this Bengals offense not having any third quarter success in a long time. We've heard that from the Steelers also. Now it's 31 straight first initial drives of the game without a touchdown.
Yeah, it's been a kind of a weird thing because a lot of people talk about, well, they're not making halftime adjustments. And personally, I don't think halftime adjustments are really a thing in the NFL. I think, to me, halftime is an opportunity that you can get the whole team together and, you know, maybe you can get their minds right. You can kind of fix them emotionally, you know, create, hey, we're getting our butts kicked. Like, we need to get it together and kind of remind them of the goal and the things they need to do in that way. But I don't think schematically you're really getting anything on halftime. You got to remember, like I used to coach college football. College football halftimes, you can get a lot done because I mean you've got forever. Like the band's playing. You know, it's like a 30-minute halftime sometimes with some of those things. Those halftimes are super long. NFL halftimes, I mean, as fans, we barely have a chance to go to the bathroom. You know, and I'm talking about at home, you know, much less in the stadium. So I don't really think that you accomplish that much, but it does go to in-game adjustments. You know, those are adjustments that should be happening earlier. And honestly, you can take another step back and see that they haven't done particularly well in towards the end of the second quarter either. You know, not a lot of scores really in in a 2-minute drill sort of scenario, somewhere where the defense struggled early in the year for the Bengals as well. So, you know, they've got to do a better job of making some of those adjustments on the fly. I think against the Texans, for the most part, things were working, and they just kind of had to come along with it, and things had to start clicking. And that's definitely, you know, because looking at that game, they didn't really make any major changes at that point. You know, Zach Taylor is a first-time head coach. I mean, second year, but first-time head coach. And I think that's something that to be able to be the head coach, but also be able to make those adjustments on the sideline in between drives, I think that's even more, you know, to put on a young coach to be able to do that. How much exactly he leans on Callahan to do those things, we don't really know. But
I need to unpack something you're saying here.
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
for a minute, because the Ravens this last week, the Ravens-Giants game, and if you're looking for recent Ravens things to try and analyze how the Bengals are going to attack that, one of the most stark changes from first to second half in terms of the pass rush you'll ever see. They rushed a bunch of fours. They rushed one 7-man rush in the first half, did have an incomplete pass on that. The second half, 11 times of only 59 times they've done it all season. They had 18 pressure events in the second half, 0 in the first half. It was the most utterly big difference. I'm hearing you talk about, you know, no halftime changes. It can happen. The really good coordinators, I believe, still can do it. And some of the really good coordinators even wait to halftime because they don't want the opponent to talk about it and say, and have the counter ready to go if they show it the last 3 plays of the first half, say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, that's a great point. I believe that those conversations are happening a lot more on the sideline than anything else. Just again, timing wise, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I actually did the math on it and kind of went through and looked through some research on it. And you've got basically the same amount of time between drives on average in the NFL as you do at halftime.
12 minutes, roughly?
Yes. Yeah. It was right in there. So it's like, again, you're not, I mean, with your travel time walking in and out of the locker room, you know, you don't really have a ton more time there. I do think that, especially if your head coach is heavily involved in those things, you know, for the Bengals, that could be a factor because, you know, in certain situations, obviously, Zach Taylor is going to have to be involved with what's going on with the defense and knowing what's up with them. But
interesting point.
Yeah, just in general, I feel like those things are happening more on the sideline than they are in the locker room in the NFL.
Okay, so let's get back to the offense a little bit. Brandon Allen, probably the biggest change for the Bengals. So they've had other big changes as well with the loss of Joe Mixon. Tell us, starting with Allen, what does he bring to an offense? Not a rookie. A lot of people think maybe this guy hasn't been around, but he's been in the league for several years now. What does he bring to the offense?
Yeah, he's been around, and oddly enough, about the same time Finley was starting some games for the Bengals last year, Brandon Allen was starting some games for the Denver Broncos, and had a little bit of success in there. Look, going into this offseason, it was a big thing last offseason. Bengals fans wanted a veteran backup quarterback, you know, and a lot of people wanted the mentor, or just to have somebody solid. Personally, I don't know how much value there is to the backup quarterback position when you don't have the team yet. You know, I think, you know, when you've got the pieces around that can win with a backup quarterback in there, it definitely has some value. But when you are rebuilding, when you have a lot of needs on the offensive line, on the defense, I really feel like it's kind of a luxury to have a backup quarterback. So I wasn't that concerned with it. And honestly, I think that the Bengals looked at it kind of the same way and said, hey, we've got Finley. He started some games for us last year. We don't really want to have to teach somebody else
or spend cap
the system. We want to be focused on Burrow, and we're not. I mean, honestly, they stated this too, that they weren't really even giving Finley reps. You know, like even for a backup quarterback, he was getting far less reps than you normally do. So I think it was kind of just this guy's done it before. Maybe we can survive that in a pinch sort of scenario. Due to COVID-19, look, the Bengals take a lot of heat for some of the decisions they make and some of the blunders they've had with different trades they've let fall through, how they dealt with the Andy Dalton situation, things along those lines. The Bengals have been really smart about COVID-19. And one of the things they did was they brought in Brandon Allen, and they made him the quarantine quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, he was not taking team reps during training camp. He was meeting separately from everyone else. He would throw some balls to guys. Coaches would yell at him anytime they saw him anywhere near another player in practice. So they did everything short of putting this guy in a bubble to try and know that they had a healthy quarterback. And honestly, I looked at it and I was like, okay, well, he's really the backup quarterback, because you see what Finley did last year. You see what Brandon Allen did last year. Finley doesn't have a very good arm, and to me, just looking at the situation from the outside right away, I was like, if something serious happens, it's Brandon Allen. They're comfortable with Finley because he's been in there. So in game, I get that he's the backup. But if something serious happens, they're going to go to Brandon Allen, and that's what ended up happening. Burrow went out in the Washington game. Finley came in. Allen was inactive. Allen actually, fun fact, before he started a game for the Bengals, had never been to Paul Brown Stadium during a game because of the COVID restrictions for players that are inactive. So he wasn't even at the stadium the day that Burrow got hurt. Finley admittedly played poorly, and maybe he does get the start the next week if he plays better in that game. But they went to Brandon Allen, and the difference between those guys, I think Allen has a much stronger arm. I think he's accurate underneath. He can get the ball out there vertically, but I don't think he has great deep ball accuracy. Thankfully, the Bengals have some receivers that are pretty good at coming down with passes like that. But he actually gives you the ability to threaten deep, to be able to throw some deep balls, and they connected on some last week that definitely helped them out.
Some great information on the backup quarterback situation. How about we talk about the offensive line? Because that's something where the Bengals were not in complete cohesion, we'll say, the first time around against the Ravens. Where do they stand right now?
So we've seen a little bit of improvement in that area lately. I think the biggest problem they had was on the interior offensive line, finding really anybody to play guard. The last time around, Xavier Su'a-Filo was injured. He is back and has definitely been an upgrade for them at that position. And they also went out and picked up Quentin Spain. So both those guys, they're better than what they were putting out there before. I don't know if necessarily either one of those guys is the future, but they have been able to give it a little bit of stability. At left tackle is the other place where we have a change. Jonah Williams, who essentially was a rookie this year after missing his entire rookie year, suffered another injury a few weeks ago. That not a serious thing. They actually said that he might have been able to play in this game. Had there been any real implications for it, but he's been out and he's been replaced by Fred Johnson recently, who's a second year player. Started actually at left tackle for them at the end of last year. So doesn't have the same athleticism, but a real strong, powerful guy.
Background is as a guard or tackle. I'm not really talking about college, but at the NFL level going into this year. You said he played left tackle last year as well, so.
Yes. So he was a practice squad guard for the Steelers, and the Bengals swiped him up off of that last year. And then he ended up starting at left tackle for the last game, and played about half of the Dolphins game of week 16, at left tackle as well. This year, when the Bengals first had the injury to Xavier Su'a-Filo, they tried him at right guard. It was not good. They did that against the Cleveland Browns in week 2. It did not go very well. He has in the interim, made some starts at both left and right tackle. He definitely shows better at tackle than he does at guard.
All right. And right tackle right now?
It's Bobby Hart. Bobby Hart's a guy that he takes a lot of heat online. Honestly, he's had a pretty decent season. Again, not a long-term answer guy, but he has not been the force that's been bringing this unit down. Let's just put it that way.
All right, fair enough. He did have a terrible year last year. I remember that.
Yes.
But okay, that's great. Now the Bengals have had a fair number of issues with injuries on offense. Obviously, Joe Mixon was a big loss. Tyler Boyd was lost last week. Is he expected back?
He is still in the concussion protocol as of Zach Taylor's press conference today. So unknown if he'll be around for this week.
All right, that's a big one. Of course, Tyler Boyd had the big catch in 2017 in the game that we shall never speak of again. And otherwise, they've AJ Green has not really had a good year, I wouldn't say, but he's getting more targets now than he was earlier in the season when we last talked.
Yeah, the last couple of games he showed up pretty well. Not really his old self by any means, but he actually had a great catch that converted a 3rd and 14 just last week, where he went up in the air and it was a contested catch situation. Really looked a lot more like the old AJ than what we've seen this year. But he's been really effective on especially on like backside slants, off play action, things along those lines.
Now we saw him on the sideline during that Ravens game with emotions that were not necessarily. He was upset, clearly, of being there, but couldn't really figure out what had happened. Can you add any color to that from way back then? Because the very next week he had 11 targets and then 13 against Cleveland the week after that. But that second half of the Baltimore game, he's just on the bench. It seemed like, and we really never understood why. And
there was the clip where amateur lip readers are telling us that he's saying trade me then. So not really sure what the situation was there. I mean, he definitely was struggling in that game. Whether they thought they were going to do better to not have him on the field or what the situation is, I'm not sure. But yeah, he has. There hasn't been any really long-term reaction to that. He's gotten back out there, and he's honestly, for what he's been able to do this season, he's probably gotten too many targets over the course of the year. But yeah, not really sure what that scenario is, or if it was just frustration with the game, it was frustration with the team. If it was frustration with the team, it hasn't really manifested itself in any other way. It's right around that time was the same time that things started to go south with veteran Carlos Dunlap, who basically as a result of that game, or right around the time of that game, they didn't believe he was doing enough in the run game, so they took him out of the lineup for that game, and he went to social media and made some noise, and now he's having a good time over in Seattle. But AJ didn't jump on that train with him, so.
Well, good for him.
For what it's worth.
He's signed through the end of this year, so he's maybe playing his last game as a Bengal on Sunday. Do you think there's any chance the Bengals will re-sign him?
I doubt it at this point. I mean, he's on the franchise tag. He's making $18 million. He's not going to get that anywhere, but he's certainly not going to get it in Cincinnati. So I think I think both sides will be looking to move on after this year.
Okay, so it being a COVID cap year in 2021, and you see AJ Green has had, you mentioned his productivity, so this is no secret, but 5.3 yards per target for the year, completely unacceptable over that many targets, or really over any number of targets for a wide receiver. But he's a player that probably is going to fall into that group that'll have to play on a 1-year prove-it deal. And in his case, I'm thinking maybe at the vet minimum. Do you think he'll adapt to that and be able to accept that for 1 year, or do you think he'll retire?
I don't know. I mean, it's been really frustrating how things have gone with him. You don't want to see it end like this. And I would think, for any player like this, he's always been a real class act. He struck me as a guy that would take less money to stay here. Never been never been a me guy. But I think that just things haven't worked out with the new staff. I think his body's failing him to some extent. I think maybe he's not fighting for some of these balls because he's of the threat of injury and what that could mean for his future, since he is only on a 1 year deal. So that might be a bit of a business situation there. But I mean, I would hope he can go somewhere and get a chance. I really think it might be obviously Fitzgerald stayed with the same team, but I think it might be similar to a Larry Fitzgerald situation where maybe at this point in his career he's more of a big slot. And I mean, the Bengals have Tyler Boyd. Like the Bengals have a guy in that spot, so he's not really a good fit in that type of role. But I think in the right team, could find a good fit for him. And I think if he had this opportunity to get matched up with a quarterback and play for a competitive team, I think he might go for that, even if it was a little bit less money.
One thing I know about Twitter is there's 100% chance that if he's a free agent come the beginning of the league year, there will be literally hundreds of Ravens fans that will say, "Go out and sign him. I don't care what it takes." And it's funny, but that happens a lot. If Des Bryant this year got the same treatment, they end up getting him, and he's similar yards per, actually less yards per target. Okay, so I think we've been through a lot of the offense here. Let's flip over the defense here. Maybe if you want to talk one more thing about the offense is how do you think they'll try and attack the Ravens? This is a defense that now has its defensive line largely back. They still have some weakness in the secondary. Do you see them really going after them more with the pass as opposed to the run, and what worked against the Steelers?
I mean, it's tough because you don't know about Tyler Boyd. T. Higgins is really emerging as a pretty big time playmaker for them. Mm-hmm. But is he going to get mirrored? Are they going to look to shut him down? That's going to be a tough one. And then, as we said, AJ Green's been a little bit limited too. So I don't know if you're really getting the matchups you want there. And then you add in a Brandon Allen at quarterback. I don't know how many favorable matchups you're getting there and how many situations you're going to like. I would expect a heavy screen game with both Giovanni Bernard and Samaje Perine. Both have shown a real knack for that, and really, like Spain and Suafilo are pretty athletic guys. They've been doing a good job of getting out there in front of those guys and setting some blocks. I mean, there was one drive last week where basically they went down the field on 2 screenplays. So I would expect that for the productivity, for use of Gio Bernard, but also in an attempt to try to mitigate, lessen the pass rush of the Ravens as well. As we said, this offensive line isn't great and it's beat up, and Fred Johnson's probably going to have his struggles. So try and take some of the pressure off Johnson and Hart by running some of those screen plays and trying to slow that down a little bit. In the pass game, I would expect quick passes. I think play action slants. We'll see a lot about that. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with the running game because they've run the ball a little bit better recently, but I think that they're facing a higher level of competition now. So it will be interesting to see what these new guards in there in Spain, Suafilo, what some of these guys can do against this Ravens defensive front.
Yeah, it's been interesting because the last couple of years now, the Ravens have not had the same kind of very low yards per carry. For 20-some years, 21, 22 years, the first in the franchise history, they never allowed 4 yards per carry in a season. And in fact, in 2012, Andy Dalton's kneel down to win the game on the last day of the season actually pulled them down to like 3.994 for the season, which was kind of a cool thing. But they never allowed 4 yards in a season. The last couple of years they haven't had all their players this year active. They do now. But the big thing that's kept the rush out of the Ravens, defensive concerns is the fact the offense has been playing so well that the opponents don't really have a chance to run the ball for very long.
Yeah, I mean, I think the complementary football aspect of things always gets lost, and how those two forces work off of each other. But I definitely think when you look at the Bengals defensively, as we kind of get into that, Lou Anarumo has taken a lot of heat, and fair enough on a lot of it. But this team has some limitations in terms of pass rushers, just a volume of pass rushers, and having the guys that can really get after the quarterback. And then all year they've been playing without a true number 2 corner. we'll get into that a little bit when we start talking about injuries on the defensive side of the ball. But I think Lou Anarumo every once in a while puts together a game plan that is just money. And you know, the consistency isn't there from the coaching standpoint. I would agree with that, but I thought they did a great job last time around against the Ravens, and you know, they were put into some tough situations. Obviously, one of the Ravens scores was a 2-play drive after a Bengals turnover, and another one was a defensive score. So you know, you take those things out of the equation, and even you know, the scoreboard starts to look a little bit more even with what you're looking at. So. Last time around, they ran a 4-3, which they had tried to run the previous year. I don't think they really had the people to do it. I think we actually talked about that last time around. I thought they probably run more of a 4-3, but they did it. They actually went with Akeem Davis-Gaither, the rookie, as their third linebacker. And against those heavier sets with the multiple tight ends, with 2 backs, they had 3 linebackers in the box. I think after the game, Jim Harbaugh referred to it as a college 4-3. I mean, that seems a little dated to me because most colleges are looking at defending the spread nowadays. But yeah, I mean, they put those guys in the box, and I think they did a real good job. I know Lamar Jackson was hurt the first time around. But you know, they were still running some read plays there, and I think the Bengals did a good job of forcing him to give the ball in a lot of situations. I think that was a part of their game plan was they wanted him to hand off the ball so they didn't have to be another Lamar Jackson highlight reel like they have been in the past.
Yeah, I think you're right about that in the first game, and in particular, Jackson was dealing with a groin injury for a lot of the season. It appears his week off due to COVID may have really helped him recover from that. And his lateral cutting appears better right now. They're using him more with a sidecar than a pistol this year. So with a sidecar, it's usually running back, usually J.K. Dobbins is the outside threat. With the pistol, more often Gus Edwards, and he's the straight ahead threat while Lamar takes the edge and stops that edge defender from crashing as easily, or at least they have to think about crashing the action in the middle. Some do, some don't, depending on how they want to scheme up their other players. But I think Jackson's groin injury was really making him less effective on those read option outside plays. He's still been very effective running the ball straight up the middle this year.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, look, that's a good group of running backs, but Jackson's he's the best athlete on probably any field he walks on. You know, so you know, I think it's a smart game plan to try and take that away. And then I think they did a good job of flowing to everything else and keeping it relatively contained. I look at it like it's one of those offenses that, like, they're going to get you, you know, and any type of option style offense, any type of whatever type of quarterback he is, any running, passing, whatever, any type of quarterback who's that dynamic, who's going to touch the ball every play, they're going to get their shots. You know, they're going to give it up. And you know, the days of you know, like in the early 2000s with that Ravens defense and the Bucs defense that went to the Super Bowls, those, you know, score 13 points on offense and will win the game kind of defenses. I just don't think you can do that.
Yeah, the NFL doesn't work that way right now.
Yeah, so I think defensively it becomes more of, we're trying to contain things, we're trying to make big plays. We're trying to prevent big plays, make plays in the red zone, and get some turnovers. You know, Bengals have you know, they actually did play pretty well in the red zone in that last game. And one of the scores they gave up, they had 3rd and 14 in the red zone, and then they you know, and then they gave that up. So they were really close to getting another red zone stop, and then they didn't.
Yeah, your evolution of the game discussion has me really harking and want to go on one of my regular soapbox points, is that defensive coordinators need to gamble to get off the field. You need to gamble to make big plays because it has become easier and easier and easier to maintain drives under the current rules the NFL is officiated under. You have all of the great receiver rules are in their favor. Now, all the lowering the helmet crapola, there's way more roughing the passer calls called than when we were kids. It's just everything is different about this game to make it more difficult on the offense. And like the baseball in the 1920s, the owners are happy to let the offense run away with it. I think I would like to see a more balanced set of rules, which favors some things about playing defense a little bit more than it does right now. But we don't have that. And given that, it changes what a defensive coordinator has to do. You can't stop 4-down football. And this is why, the great failings without tremendous gambling. So while I think it was the wrong play for the Jets, right, to rush 8 and let Oakland win that ball game, I understand if it had happened earlier in a drive with, say, a minute and a half to go, why they might have done it and taken the risk on a play like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you've got to be willing to roll the dice a little bit. I mean, I think to some extent you want to be a little bit safe. That like giving up big plays versus giving up touchdowns. I think is a difference. Having that one guy back there to be able to have that opportunity, because I think red zone defense comes into it in a big time way, especially when you've got the quarterback. And I think you look at a lot of the Patriots defenses over the years were ranked pretty poorly when you looked at yards. But they were ranked very well when it came to points. And I think you can truly play a bend don't break defense and play good red zone defense when you've got a guy that is going to score touchdowns. When you're trading touchdowns for field goals because you got Tom Brady, you can do that.
Right. It's much easier to play defense with the lead. That's the simplest way I can make that same comment. I mean, look no further than the Ravens this last week to the listeners here if you want to know that. Okay, so let's go back to the defense here a little bit. You mentioned the pass rush a little bit. Carl Lawson is very impressive to me, particularly against Villanueva in the Pittsburgh game. Seems to have had a pretty good year. A little bit of a breakout for him because he had not been quite as productive. Had good pass rusher, not a great pass rusher since he was drafted.
So here's a couple of big things with him. Number one is injuries, and the Bengals got him in the 4th round because of injuries. I think he had 2 ACLs in college, so people were afraid of him. But like you could see it in college, like people knew, when they drafted him, like, "Woo, this is a guy if he can stay healthy." And the Marvin Lewis approach to him was less is more, and they used him as a situational pass rusher. And then even when he was productive in that role, and then coming into the next year, a lot of fans thought they were going to use him more. And Marvin said, "Nope, we're not doing that. Less is more." And sure enough, they did it again. And really, in the first year with Zach Taylor, it was kind of the same thing. That it was Carlos Dunlap and Sam Hubbard was kind of the primary guy. And then 3rd downs, here comes Lawson, and Sam Hubbard kicks into the interior. Now. Like that was actually what happened. Like I said, for the Ravens game, Lawson was doing pretty well against the run. He'd done pretty well against the run and pass against the Eagles, and they threw him in there, and they bumped him up the depth chart, and they've really made him an every down player. Ironically, since he's been an every down player and played substantially more snaps this year, he also has been healthy. And he's going to play the full season for the first time in his career, and he's been productive and good against the run. So this is the sort of thing that always happens to Bengals right when they get into that contract year, of course, especially as a pass rusher is bound to make a ton of money. But yeah, I mean he's been good, he's been solid, but they really haven't had much opposite him. Sam Hubbard, I believe he actually got hurt in that Ravens game. He was gone for quite a while. He's a technician, and he's a guy that they move around a lot and kind of create, and they can scheme some opportunities for him for the most part. Last week was an exception to that. Last week he was getting after it, but he had a pretty good matchup there. So they haven't, they've got Lawson, but one guy's a little bit easier to account for, and without that Carlos Dunlap guy on the other edge, and without really anything on the interior, with Geno Atkins being not around, it's been tough for them to consistently generate any kind of pressure.
Yeah, you can see them struggling with that. They certainly did a great job against the Steelers. How do you feel? Just looking at the Steelers here, this is a concern for Ravens fans going forward. You guys have seen them recently, but that Steelers offensive line has got to be one of the worst run blocking offensive lines I can ever remember the Steelers having. DeCastro and Pouncey are a shadow of who they once were.
Yeah, it's really weird. And part of me points to Munchak, and it's the same sort of thing. I mean, the first year that Dante Scarnecchia retired from the Patriots for a year, and their offensive line got really bad. I apologize for using a lot of Patriots references, but I live in Rhode Island, so I see it all the time. So that offensive line, couldn't get it done without the coach, and now you get now you get Munchak moving on, and this group doesn't really seem to be what they used to be. And I honestly, you looked at this division before, and with Burrow coming in, and my opinion is fading a little bit on Baker Mayfield, but I liked Baker Mayfield at one point, and obviously Lamar Jackson. It was shaping up like, hey, 3 of these 4 teams, have got their guy for the next several years, and then there was the Steelers, who they've got an aging guy. But in my head, it was like, all right, well, they're going to have that offensive line, they're going to have the defense, so they're going to be just fine. But it's kind of going the opposite way with that, and I think with the offensive line, it's gone away from that. They're not getting it done anymore, and with the defense, it's become a situation. Maybe again the evolution of the league a little bit, where I think a defensive unit can really be a house of cards, and when one guy's out for a couple of weeks, it can really shatter the unit. And we've seen that with the Steelers have struggled with some different injuries, and obviously we've seen that with the Ravens when they've had some other guys out.
Yeah, certainly the defensive linemen have hurt the Ravens. So let's talk a little bit maybe about the strength of the Bengals defense, which is clearly a secondary at this point. Jesse Bates having a huge year, but William Jackson's having a big year too. So talk through those guys and what you're seeing out of them in terms of growth.
Well, William Jackson, another guy who's in a contract year, having a big year at a position where he's going to make a lot of money, so that's fantastic. Jackson actually is also in the concussion protocol. He left last week's game, so hoping to have him out there, because really, they need him out there. It's tough when he's not out there, and honestly, the second he went out, the Texans started moving the ball a lot better last week. So, Jackson, better man guy, but he can be a top level corner. He plays at a very high level. They were supposed to have Trey Waynes opposite him. Trey Waynes has been out all season. I haven't seen him at all in a Bengals uniform, and due to that fact, in my opinion, they haven't had a true number 2 corner all year.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're good. You want me to repeat that?
No, I heard it just fine. So they haven't had a number 2 corner all year, and they've had good safety play. I think we would agree.
Yes. Yep. So they have a good safety play, and really, Bates is incredible. Bates had one bad game, and it was really a bad tackling game. Which is never going to be a strong suit. But week 2 against the Browns, he missed a few tackles, along with a lot of other guys that were missing tackles that week. But yeah, Bates, ridiculous Pro Bowl snub. Definitely one of the better safeties in the league. And he's got to get on a better defense, and the team's got to win more games so people start noticing that. But he's a serious playmaker at that position. Von Bell struggled in the pass game early in the year. He's a little bit more of a in the box guy, and has done well, particularly as a cutback player coming down in the run game. He has evolved throughout the year, and he has been better. We've seen him in man-to-man situations with some tight ends at times. We've seen him make more plays in the passing game as the years come along. So, I feel pretty good about the safety position, but the corner position, especially with if Jackson isn't able to go, is a real problem. The next guy up there is Darius Phillips. To me, Darius Phillips is like a perfect fourth corner. Like I just don't think he should be a starting corner. I think he's a great fourth corner because he can play all the spots, and he can fill in. And then beyond that, once Jackson went out, they brought LaShawn Sims in, and LaShawn Sims is a pretty big liability in there. So you get down that deep into really your fifth corner when we're counting Mackenzie Alexander, the nickel in there, and that's a big time problem for him.
All right, let me ask a question as it pertains to the Ravens here, because the Ravens, what's been great about the offense the last 4 weeks, one of the things is you can see the opposing defenses struggling with the man versus zone dilemma against Jackson. If you play zone defense, he'll pick you apart. Loves to throw to the tight ends, loves to throw play action, do all the things that can beat zone defense very effectively. If you play man defense, he becomes an enormous scramble risk every single play. And he's run the Ravens out of a number of pressures and into big scramble plays in these last few weeks in particular. They've had to adjust offensive line scoring because of it. But anyway, how do you expect the Bengals, who have traditionally had some of the most problems in containing Lamar, to deal with him this time around? Do you think it'll be more man or zone?
I'd say, zone and really match zone concepts. I think they did a pretty good job of that last time. That you would see when Jesse Bates said after the game, we knew their pass game was about 89-15. And you could see that on the film that if Andrews or Hollywood were going deep, like they were getting on him, and usually they were bracketing them with a couple of guys. So I think it's, personally, any type of option offense, running quarterback, to me, you've got to have, you've got to be playing mostly zone against that. But yeah, I think they can. They'll match zone and match up on those guys, particularly in those spots. Andrews up the seams, things along those lines where they're worried about getting hit.
All right. Is there one player you think matches up well against the Ravens this time around?
I mean, I think Bates is a pretty good matchup because I think some of those deeper balls hang up there a little bit, and he's a pretty good ball hawk, and he might be able to steal one here or there. So I would definitely look for him and be on the watch out for him to make a big play in the pass game.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I would have that on that armband he wears, fine 30 on every play, the way some quarterbacks did it for Ed Reed and Brady in particular. But anyway, I do think keeping the ball away from Bates will be an absolutely critical thing for this game. Matt, appreciate having you on the show so much. Tell us where people can find your work and your Twitter handle.
Yeah, so on Twitter, I'm at Coach Minich. Pretty much all my stuff gets posted there. I do Bengals videos, breakdown videos for SB Nation's Bengals channel. That's Cincy Jungle. So you can find that stuff on YouTube and do a little podcasting for them as well, which is available on iTunes.
All right. Outstanding. You're certainly one of the best guests league-wide, and we're so lucky to have the really good ones on this show, analysts from each team, and you're right in that group. We really appreciate you coming on, Matt. Want to point people to filmstudybaltimore.com. Got some great new visuals out there in the gallery section, offensive line charts, but also some great stuff to show ample time and space, ball out quick, and pressure differences by game. You hear me talking about those things on the offensive pod, but if you look there, you'll have some nice division that'll give you a visual kind of sense of it and how it's trended for the year. Matt, again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.